So, before I start, Joe, you know Meshuggah at all? Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
The only song I know well is "Bleed."
I figured. Okay.
I never got big into them, but
All right.
I appreciate them as musicians.
Yeah. Well, this is the origin of Djent and kind of their, because really, when you look back on it, they kind of, brought that sound that you hear a lot in metal, that like really twangy, like coily string, like
The off-kilter rhythms too. Before, just to help you set this up too, Dryden, remember, is a generation younger than us.
Yeah.
So Meshuggah really influenced a lot of the bands of his generation.
Exactly. So
before you keep going, when
worries.
did Meshuggah? When did they originate? I don't even know. Was it the early 90s or something?
They formed in 1987.
Oh, 80s. Wow.
But yeah, they kind of they have a bunch of music that, and they kind of like, I think Obsin with Bleed on it is like their 6th record. So they have a bunch of records before that.
Wow.
Until they got to this point.
Dude, Iron Maiden's first record came out in 1980.
Yeah. So they're
wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right. So Djent, it's a subgenre of progressive metal, and it's termed as, it's basically an onomatopoeia, as like the sound of the guitar when you're hitting it, like djent, djent, djent. And that's kind of where the term comes from.
I didn't know
have
that.
These little
look at you, got this whole thing going on here. Did you do this in school too?
Honestly, no, not really.
I had to, last year of school, I had to kick his ass to get him to graduate. I was like, bro, why are you failing creative writing, man?
Like this, I would have cared.
I mean, look at this. Is great. Yeah.
So I have this little clip here, actually. So basically, to give a little context for this clip, the guitar player of Meshuggah, Frederick, I think his last name's like Thorndale.
Thorndal.
He kind of coined the term Djent, but Misha from Periphery made it like a big thing on, like, I forget which forum. He kind of talks about it here, so let me play this clip for you guys.
One of their albums is called Djent is Not a Drama.
That's their newest one, I think.
Yeah, Djent is Not a Drama.
Yeah, so this clip is good. Let me show you guys this.
If you're just chugging, people kind of bias it to the lower strings, get it sounding nice and big, right? The whole Djent thing was you kind of do it with 4 strings, like a double power chord. And then you hear the difference there. So it's actually the onomatopoeia of that sound, right? The Djent, 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 right? As opposed to...
Yeah, single note is not real Djent. You need to do at least 3-4 notes.
I'm gonna be...
So yeah, that's also interesting what he says there. Like, I didn't even really know that going into it. When they're hitting the strings, when they're hitting those chords, they're hitting like all the way across the guitar, like pretty much all 4 of the top strings, or all 3 in the 4th string. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, he basically popularized it. Misha, he kind of made it a bigger thing.
I always thought it was some Swedish word that meant something.
That's what I thought too. It sounds like it. And Meshuggah's from Sweden, so it kind of like fits. But it also, I think that's maybe where it comes to how they spelled it like that.
They spell it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
With the Spanish J.
Yeah. So Meshuggah, they formed in 1987 in Umeå, Sweden. It's like a really small little town in the middle of Sweden. And they're obviously known for their very like complex polyrhythmic musical style. Which they also kind of, I wouldn't say they brought that into music, but for metal, they very much like
popularized
that rhythmic. Yeah, that rhythmic. Even Chino, I should have put it in here, but there's a lot of their new Deftone stuff is totally Meshuggah inspired. They've said it that their records are Meshuggah inspired. Just like the riffing and especially the tone too. Their gear, like they have like a really crushing tone. So I want to pull up too that their first demo right there, I think it sounds to me like a lot like Metallica, like early Metallica, like Seek and Destroy esque stuff, but it's also
Like
got
standard
that, like,
thrash.
yeah, yeah. It's not bad, but it's also nothing to like, you know.
Yeah, it's not groundbreaking.
If you want to go listen to it, that first record, it's interesting. It's like thrashy, but it's like like I said, it kind of sounds like, you know, Kill 'Em All esque stuff. And
I can
then,
put a clip in post too, like when I do
yeah.
the segment for this. I can like clip in like a
Yeah,
6-second
yeah.
clip so we don't get sued. Because I did that Rat video where we talked about the Rat release, and that video is getting a lot of views, and I plugged
That'll
in
be
one
better.
single.
It'll just be better because the
Yeah.
quality of the videos isn't very good. So they've released a couple other things after this, but later on, like I think a lot of people's, I'm sure maybe you can touch on this, Dad. A lot of people's first, like, you know, in the underground world, you know,
Introduction.
yeah, I was gonna say introduction to Meshuggah would be Future Breed Machine. That song, I don't know if you've heard it, but it was like super popular underground and like kind of like a musician's song.
Yeah, when I first heard him, I got kind of a Fear Factory vibe.
Yeah. They definitely, I think their drummer too, they have that very like synchronized guitar and kick
That's
drum
why.
pattern. They do that a lot. And I
They
think
hit together.
Yeah, I think Fear Factory was kind of the first to do that, but Meshuggah definitely changed the game in a whole nother way. It's like
Sure.
different.
They put their own
And then-
spin on it.
Yeah.
I mean,
then
Fear
late-
Factory wasn't the first band to do that either, but I think in that era,
Yeah.
in the 90s,
In
they
metal, I
popularized
feel
it.
like they
Not what
kind of
Dino told us.
Dino
Yeah,
said they were
yeah.
the first to do the
He said-
scream sing thing. He's like, we were the first band to have heavy vocals and clean vocals, is what Dino said about Fear Factory.
Yeah, I believe him.
I mean, in that genre, because I was like, what about Angel Dust? Because Angel Dust came out the same year as Soul of a New Machine by Fear Factory. By
Yeah.
Faith No More. But it was kind of bubbling up. I mean, honestly, Mike Patton might have got the idea from Fear Factory. Who knows?
Okay.
He was into a lot of that music, like Carcass and Fear Factory. So anyway.
So this album came out also a little bit later. Obzin. It was released, I believe, let me confirm. Released in 2008. This is the one with Bleed on it. So this is the one where they really got their like kind of more
Solidified
bigger
their
show.
status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just found this out too before we jumped on here, that a big reason that it got super big is because it was in Rock Band, that song. So a lot of people like discovered it, or you know, were trying to play it because it's super difficult, all the rhythm patterns and shit that they're doing.
I would have guessed that album came out earlier than 08. That's
Yeah. It's
That
interesting.
seems like so soon. Like doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was almost 20 years ago. It was
yeah.
wild.
16 years
Yeah.
ago, basically.
Actually, were nominated for a Grammy for Obs, and they didn't win, of course, but they were nominated.
Did
so that's
they?
pretty cool.
Is that one where they use programmed drums?
No, so I should have put that in here. That's what I was trying to do before we jumped on here too. I don't know if you guys know that album. If anyone knows that album with the little snakes on it, we'll put a little picture up of it. It's called Catch 33. That entire album is completely programmed drums, and that's another thing. Meshuggah was like a big pioneer of like, they would like record a riff for their song and then just program the drums to it. And now that's like a standard. Like everyone kind of records riffs in their room and like puts drums to it, you know, on their MIDI. So they were big on that. And their drummer too, Thomas, he was one of the first, or if not the first person to do one of those little drum libraries where they basically record this album. They record each of the drummers like cymbals and all his little toms and stuff and put it in a little sample kit so you can use it, you know, with a keyboard or whatever, like how people do it today. But it like evolved into I believe it's called Easy Drummer, which has been featured on like thousands and thousands of albums across a bunch of different genres. So it's interesting because they have like this low key like influence that people that use Easy Drummer probably have no goddamn idea who Meshuggah is or what their music sounds like.
But they popularized that.
Yeah, because they were just very innovative. Like they always said that they never chased technicality. They never chased anything like that. They just made the music that they wanted to hear, that they messed with, and that's what came out. So yeah, Obsden, big album for them. Definitely turned a lot of people onto them. That song has a bunch of cool that album has a bunch of cool deep cuts too. Like it's a song called Pineal Gland Optics.
That's a cool title.
Like yeah. So this is Umeå, Sweden, for anyone that it's a little cute little Swedish town.
Nice sunset photo.
Yeah, and it's interesting too when you see these towns like Gojira, the little town they're from in France. It's like they're from these little like, oh, I'm from this little town in Sweden.
There's like cobblestone streets, man. When I went to Austria, I stayed in this little town that had like cobblestone streets. It was like straight out of Sound of Music, man. It was
and then just the most aggressive shit comes out of there. It's awesome.
Well, that's why they've been.
Yeah, they're just like, what the hell? Yeah.
Same reason Slipknot came out of Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on too their drummer Thomas Hake. He's, I think, like most drummers, a very big important part of their sound and their band. But he definitely upped the game, like we were just talking about. Fear Factory definitely brought that new thing of like syncopating the kicks in the guitar, but I think Meshuggah kind of brought it to a whole nother level. Like he'll be doing it for the entire song. It's only locked into the rhythm. And what's cool about them too is they kind of put a whole generation of musicians onto like polyrhythms and stuff, where like basically for people who don't know or aren't musicians, it's like one guitar is playing one rhythm like in 4/4 and another instrument, guitar or whatever, is playing in a completely different time signature. Yeah. So, and if you listen to all their songs, it's weird too, because then they'll kind of sync up, and they talk about it a lot too, because that's actually, I have this little, basically people make all kinds of like, there's like, you can find science papers and all kinds of like papers on people trying to do the time signatures of Meshuggah and the math and like make all kinds of analysis on it. And this is just what their drummer has to say basically when he was asked what are some things that people haven't been getting right, and he goes, first of all, it's the time signature. People stating like this track starts in 2316 or whatever. Our songs are all written on a 4/4 platform. Even though you could analyze it and make it into something else, that still doesn't make it right.
Oh wow. So they're just doing crazy rhythms, but it's in 4/4.
Yeah, I mean, if you play music, you can understand that kind of stuff definitely does come out naturally. Like you don't even really realize you're doing stuff like that on time. Like, because, and if you listen to them too, a lot of the time he's playing like, again, 4/4 on the cymbals, and then the guitars are playing like 9, whatever the fuck on. And so he's following.
He's still got that like 4/4 cymbal.
Exactly.
Going, even though he's going
exactly. So that's what makes it interesting too. And he's flat. I would say he's flashy, but he's not like, he's not doing like crazy fills all the time. It's really just rhythm oriented music, which is pretty cool. Like they're really focused on the rhythm aspect. It's a lot less melody. And I think that's the difference kind of coming from the 90s into this like Djent era, this 2000s era. A lot of those 90s bands, it was like that string skipping at the gates like sound, which is great. Don't get me wrong.
The bounce thing, like boom, dun, 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 dun,
yeah,
dun,
yeah,
like maidenish kind of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this Meshuggah kind of made it like there's another type of metal that's out there, you know, like there's another type of
there's another way to do this.
Yeah, because most of those bands, like I think if you listen to a lot of 90s metal, everyone would, like I just said, they were trying to copy At the Gates or whatever, do that, like at least in the extreme metal world, like so.
Yeah, I mean, I think Meshuggah is like, their influence is kind of underappreciated on the modern sound of metal.
And I feel like that's kind of what I'm getting at for sure.
Yeah, even the mainstream modern sound of metal, you know, it's like I feel like a lot of the kind of bands that are bigger right now, that are heavier anyway, have that influence. Obviously, Periphery being probably one of the bigger ones. But then it's also when you talk about the 90s, I think one of the things that's interesting about 90s metal, you know, or I guess maybe more the early part of the 90s, is it was more, I feel like there's more of a focus on songwriting, like trying to, because of the grunge alternative thing. And so when Meshuggah and Fear Factory and bands like that kind of came on the scene, it became, to your point, a lot more about the rhythmic aspect of the music rather than like, hey, let's have like a cool like build up to a catchy chorus or something.
And I think that's the problem with a lot of that era of music and what kind of becomes stale. And that's what I dig about Meshuggah is that, first of all of the records are different. Like you can put on any Meshuggah song. I mean, they have a sound for sure, but they're always doing something, you know, different on their songs. But also, I think bands come into, and I've noticed it with my bands, I'm sure you have too, being in bands and stuff. Sometimes people come into like a writing space with this mindset of like, oh, this needs to be a deathcore song, or this part needs to be a blah, blah, blah part. And it's like, dude, just let there's no limits. It just let it be what it needs to be. And I think that's how they kind of got to where they are with their sound. They just let the music do the thing. And so now everyone's got 8-string guitars and I've got a 7-string guitar on the way.
It was really Korn too that started the 7-string thing. Start it. Stevie Vai was probably the first guy to have one.
So for 7 strings for sure, like Korn and stuff like that. But when you get to like 8 and all those, like Animals as Leaders, when you're getting to like 8 strings and shit like that, that's all Meshuggah, Periphery, all that shit. Yeah, so that I thought that was a pretty cool story segment.
Yeah, that was good. That's good. Again, it's a band that's, I think their influence is underappreciated, especially on the modern sound of heavier stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder if bands like, I wonder how much influence a band like Dillinger Escape Plan or Candiria would put on Meshuggah, like if they were influential at that point yet. Because a lot of the bands I listened to in the early 2000s, like Candiria, the East Coast, kind of like mathcore, or like what's it called? Ion Dissonance, Dillinger Escape Plan, Candiria, a lot of those mathy bands, even Cryptopsy to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of others.
That's what's interesting about Meshuggah too, or that kind of like sound is like Ion Dissonance and those bands would be considered, like you said, like mathcore. I don't know if Meshuggah, like it's just something, it's Djent, you know, it's something else. Like it's not, they have like that mathy style, but then the sound and the vocals are a lot different. They don't do any cleans really. They're not,
there's no hooks.
Yeah, that's the thing too. They're not focused on melodies really, which is, I think they have melodies in their songs, but it's kind of dope to like, every metal song is like about like a build up or whatever. It's some melody, and they kind of like, it's just straight fucking chugs all the whole song.